My friend, welcome to the world's best kept secret podcast, a podcast that brings you exclusive interviews from experts all over the world with life-changing work that you didn't even know existed. I'm your host, Prima Jobs, a partner for those that are ready to take their life-changing work in front of those whose life or business depends on it. Please follow or subscribe for more. Today, I'm so excited for such an amazing guest that I'm about to bring to you guys. You guys will love this guest no matter what. Today, I have the honor to bring to you someone who, before I even bring him up, I want to first kind of tell you how I found him. A friend of mine was launching his book, and he was looking for a way to get it in front of as many people as he could. And somehow this guest came highly, highly recommended. My guest told me about it, and I was like, you tell me what happened. So he went and talked to this guest, and this guest gave him like a taster or a teaser of what he does. And so he gave him a package of like 8 shows. He said, I'll put you on 8 shows and we kind of see how it goes. And I kid you not, this guest went on the 8 shows and told me that he got 20 referrals from the 8 shows and then got some other bonuses. Talk about over-delivering. Talk about guys who are in the weeds doing stuff. Talk about people who are making things happen. And my guest today is one of them. Without further ado, I want to bring to this spotlight the guest for the day, Nick. Welcome to the Uncommon Market Disruptor podcast. I'm excited to have you today.
I'm excited to be here. Can I ask you the first question today, Prima?
Yeah, sure.
Whenever I'm meeting somebody or a second or third conversation, I love to ask, what is the best book that you read last year? What comes to mind first?
Best book, I think I keep reading the same books over and over and over again. Over the last year, I think I've been cycling through Donald Miller's book called Business Made Simple. I don't read a lot of books, but when I get a book, I flip it around and around and around till like I feel like I know everything in this book.
One of the biggest issues that most people face in this world of coaching and entrepreneurship is that they try to read too many books too fast. And as a result, they don't take any action on the books they're reading. But I believe the slow, nuanced experience of one book is better than the fast, superficial experience of reading 52 books in a year or 100 books in a year. So pat yourself on the back a little bit. I think that you are doing it the right way.
That question leads me into another question, but it would be unfair for me not to really give you the introduction you deserve. Nick is the person that if you want your books in front of the right person, that's Nick. If you want to market your book, you go to Nick. If you want to turn your book into captivating videos, that's Nick. In my opinion, Nick is the best in the world at getting the right book in front of the right person. If you know you can write a good book, if you know you want to write a book worth reading, a book worth sharing, worth distributing, and you kind of want to hand it over to somebody who is like playing A at that game, that is Nick for you. The thing that I know about Nick is I don't know how he does it, and I hope he does tell us today, but somehow he's collaborated with everyone that is worth knowing in promoting their book. Talk about the G's and the Robins and everyone of this world, and their book sits on BookThinkers. And so get a pen, get a paper, because today we're going to talk about everything book marketing and book selling and book amazingness. Nick, where should we start? Tell us how to get 170,000 followers on Instagram.
Nobody ever loves the answer to this question, but slow and steady wins the race. You know, there's the famous Aesop's fable, the tortoise and the hare, right? The hare takes off, the tortoise is just slow and steady. But eventually, the tortoise wins that race. And I think it's the same thing on social media. If we show up every single day for years and years and years, and we provide value to our audience, eventually we are going to have a lot of followers. So I never set out to grow an audience of hundreds of thousands of people, but I did show up every single day and just try to provide value to my ideal follower. And the output is a lot of followers. So I have a lot of tactical strategies that I can teach as well. But I think first and foremost, it's this idea that if you show up every single day for years and years and years, eventually the followers will come. So that's kind of step number one.
I love the answer. I'm sure people who are listening to you are like, yeah, but Nick, like step one and two and three, like I know the showing up beats, but like step one, two, three, we can hear this advice, we just never can hear enough of it. And unfortunately, we think there's a more complicated answer and a more secret bullet somewhere. Is there anything else you can add to showing up every day and genuinely helping someone over the
Oh
years?
yeah. I mean, I can add so much value. So this lesson that I'm about to say next also relates to books. A lot of times we want our content on social media and the books we're writing to be perfect, 100% done, the best version of ourselves, and we're embarrassed or insecure about putting out any less. But I think that's one of the major problems that people face because our content is never going to be perfect and the books we're writing are never going to be perfect. I mean, I put out Rise of the Reader last year, my very first book, and it was a 3-year project and I got stuck at that 80% done mark. And I sat at that 80% done mark for like 2 years. And eventually I just said, you know what? 80% done is the best I'm going to get. So I just put it out there and it's changing lives all over the place. The same thing with social media content. It doesn't need to be perfect. In fact, it's better if it's just 80% of the way there because then we can test it out in the real world. We can see how people react. We can collect their feedback and we can make changes as we go. And so we're all going to start with 0 followers and 0 likes and 0 comments and 0 views. But as you show up every single day, try your best to provide value, collect feedback from your audience, make changes, then the content just gets better and better and better and better and better over time. So yeah, I think there are a few steps maybe earlier than showing up every day and providing value, like defining who is your target audience, what value do you want to provide, what business do you want to grow? And that's going to change a lot, right? Write your goals in pencil so that you can erase them and change them as many times as necessary. But it's only by showing up every day, providing value, collecting feedback that we're ever going to get to that place where, you have hundreds of thousands of followers and that kind of stuff. As far as what kinds of content to put out there, I strongly recommend video content where you, as the person leading the brand, is the thought leader, teaching with your words. In today's social media environment, it's almost impossible to go viral with a picture post. It's not going to happen. People want to be engaged. They want to understand you. They want to get to know your personality. And they want to hear your stories. They want to hear the emotion in your voice. And that happens through video content. Video has also been shown to be the fastest way to form a relationship. I mean, all of us watching this podcast today or listening, we can think of some online creator, whether it's a coach, whether it's a podcaster, maybe an author, a business owner, who we've never met before, but we feel like we know them. And that happens through video content. So you want to do the same thing. And video is scary, but you can't get to video 100, which is polished and clean, without the first 99, which are a little bit more messy. But if you constantly receive feedback and start changing little things, 1% improvements every single time you put out a piece of content, eventually you'll get to a place where you're really confident with your stuff and you know it works. Now, on top of that, I also recommend documenting instead of just trying to create content. We don't find ourselves interesting, but other people find us interesting. And so document what you're already doing. Pull out your phone right now and say, hey, I'm listening to this amazing podcast between Nick and Prima. They're sharing a ton of valuable wisdom. What podcast do you listen to? And put that out as a piece of content, right? Document what you're already doing. Don't try to create content. So that's a faster way to get content out, is just show your normal life. Like, what are you doing to improve yourself? What might your clients find valuable? And do it in the form of video where you're talking to the camera. So I have a lot more to share, but like, what do you think of those tips? Were any of those useful?
I feel like there's a way you have like a way you condense the value per second. And so I'm personally busy taking notes. I hope my friends are doing the same. Nick is like one of the best at what he's doing. The thing that I like the most is like, stop thinking you want to create everything and start documenting the stuff you're already doing.
All of us, like I said before, we don't find ourselves interesting, but everybody else sure does. And so if you're reading a book and you find a cool takeaway, that's content. If you're listening to a podcast and you get a great takeaway, that's content. If you're walking your dog and you have an epiphany, that's content. If you're playing with your kids and you observe them doing something interesting, that's content. So all of the, if if you have a morning routine, and you're making your breakfast or whatever, what's the reason behind what you're choosing to eat? That's content. So yeah, stop getting overwhelmed by this idea of every morning I have to sit down and I have to think of something interesting to say, and just share what you're already doing. Now, over time, I think you go from unstructured documentation to curated content, but you need the momentum. You have to start spinning the flywheel. You need to get people paying attention first, and that's the best way to do it.
I love it, Nick. I love it. I love it. And I even haven't asked Nick like his story. At some point, like the person who is listening to us right now is like a coach, consultant, course creator, and they have a bank of wisdom. And sometimes it's just hard for them to kind of go, okay, where do I put the focus? Like, how did you come to this process of going, I'm going to be about books and books alone? Because I'm sure you had like other things you could have done in this world. How did you come to that decision of like, I'm going to do books and just books and everything else can wait or be on the side? How did you get there? Because I feel like a lot of people are stuck in this, I can do it all, I can teach everything, and I want to teach everything.
The riches are made in the niches, right? That's a saying that we've all heard. Or it's easier to be a big fish in a small pond than it is to be a small fish in a big pond, right? There's so many different ways that you could teach this lesson. But for me, it happened sort of by accident. I mean, what might surprise most people who are new to me is that I was not a reader growing up. I was more of the athlete stereotype, not really much of the academic. So you couldn't pay me to read a book when I was growing up. And that behavior, that attitude of like, I'm too cool to read books, that's not fun or enjoyable. That attitude continued with me through most of my college experience or university, whatever you call it. And going into my senior year, my fourth year of college, I took a business internship at a local software company. It was a sales internship. And my boss at the time, Kyle, he saw what I could best describe as some unfulfilled potential, right? I was a little rough around the edges, a little bit of a know-it-all, a little bit too cool for school. And he said, hey, man, you're commuting 1 hour each way in the car, 5 days a week. That's 10 hours in the car. And he said, Nick, listening to the same song or the same playlist or the same radio station for the 500th time, it's not going to get you closer to where you want to be in life. But the right podcast might. He listened to podcasts. And he explained to me the world's most successful people in business, in life, in coaching, in health, in fitness, in mindset, in relationships, in everything, they're all giving their secrets away for free on podcasts. So the average show is 1 hour. You can listen to one business podcast on the way to work, one on the way back every day. That's 10 shows a week. So by the end of the summer, we'll call it 3 months, 13 weeks, you could listen to 130 business interviews or music. Which one wins? I'm like, I think the podcasts probably hold more value. And as I started listening to these podcasts, I started realizing that most of the successful people that I wanted to be like, all the business celebrities, books were a big part of their journey. They either read a lot of books when they were younger, or they gave a lot of credit for their success now to the books that they were reading. And a lot of them even wrote books themselves. And so books, 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 that became the theme. And so I just realized one day, like, if I'm too cool to read books, then I'm also choosing to live under my potential. And I don't want that. I'm too competitive for that. And so one day on a lunch break, I went to my local bookstore with a list of the books that I kept hearing on the podcast, right? Everybody was saying the same books for the most part. And I grabbed about 10 books and I started reading and implementing them. And it was painful at first, like pulling teeth. I mean, I really didn't want to read the books. But then they started to solve problems and build skills. And I went from being scared to talk about certain subjects to leading conversations on those subjects. And it was all because of the books. And so, to make a very long story short, and I'm happy to dive into more if you want, my friends and family were like, listen, we're done hearing about the books. Post about them on social media. If that's your thing, go find like-minded people. Post the books you're reading, share your favorite takeaways from them, and I bet other people who want to talk books will find you. And that's exactly what happened. I just started talking about books. Now, I had a lot of other interests, right? I love sports. I love American football. I love world travel. If I had to start a new business, it probably would be in the travel space. I can't get enough of it. But for whatever reason, call it divine timing or, some type of divine intervention, I chose to start posting about the books. And that's how I built a career out of it. Now, the last thing I'll mention is sometimes we hear, and I think everybody has this backwards. Sometimes we hear, find a pre-existing passion and then build a business off of it.
Mm.
I didn't have a big passion related to the books, right? I had only just discovered them and it was like a little bit of energy. But through consistently posting on social media, showing up, providing value, and reading these books, I developed a passion, right? I said I was pulling teeth in the beginning. It's not like I was a reader when I was growing up, but I found something that was valuable, that other people found valuable. And over time, by consistently delivering value, I developed a passion. So the passion came from the consistency, not the other way around. And now I'm obsessed with books, obviously, and everything about them. But it wasn't always that way. So the passion came from the consistency, not the other way around. And now I'm obsessed with books, obviously, and everything about them. But it wasn't always that way. So that was a long story. Thank you for giving me the platform.
So now you start doing the books, Nick, and you start providing value. But then when I look at your footage or whatever you're doing, I see all of the greats, the Grant Cardones, the Gary V's, and all of these guys. And I'm like, this guy get lucky? Like, can I actually access these people? And so I want to really understand, like, you're starting a podcast right now, and you envision getting the best of the best at some point on the podcast. How would you think about it? Because I know you've done it.
I will answer that question, but first I want to tell one more strategy that will lead into this.
Okay.
So when I started to get some followers on social media and people would check out my page, they would go, cool book recommendations. They would read the book. It would change their life in a major way. And then they would come back to me and they would say, Nick, thank you so much for your page, for your community. I read a book that you recommended. It solved a problem, relieved some pain, built a skill, whatever. And now my life is better. I became addicted to that feeling. I wanted more of it. I was able to create a positive impact just by sharing the books that I was reading. And I didn't know originally that I would be motivated by impact. At first, it was almost like a little bit of an ego thing, like, oh, I can get more followers and that kind of thing. But then I started to realize, like, the more people that were paying attention, the more opportunity for changing their lives there was. And I loved that. I love impact. It's a really big motivator for me now. So I started researching how do you grow on social media. And I stumbled across this video one time by Gary Vee where he talked about the $80 strategy. And the $80 strategy is a little complex, but I'll do my best to simplify it. He says, you know the saying, your 2 cents. It really just means your opinion, your thoughts, your feedback, your 2 cents. So if you give somebody your 2 cents, you're giving them your feedback. He says every day on social media, you need to go out into the world of hashtags, search hashtags related to your target follower or customer, and then go leave your 2 cents on trending posts that are using that hashtag. 90 posts per day times 2 cents is $1.80. He calls it the $80 strategy. Here's what this looks like. For me, if I just posted about Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, I would search hashtag Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I would pull up all of the posts, and there are trending. You can filter by most recent. Now you can filter by reels. And I would just go to trending posts. And I would leave a 2 to 3 sentence comment on all of the trending posts. I would try to get to 90 per day. And that might look like, oh, hey, I love your takeaway. I had similar takeaways. Here's one of my favorite quotes. Thanks for posting. Now I'm going to be the longest comment on that trending post. Not fire emoji, but something real, something genuine. That means a few things. A lot of people are going to see the comment because Instagram naturally weights and prioritizes large kind of conversational comments. If in your comment you can ask a question of the person that posted it and start a little comment thread, then that's also beneficial. The person who posted it is going to get a long notification. Who the heck is this BookThinkers guy that just left a fat comment on my post? I'm going to check out his page. Now, I'm not saying follow me, but naturally they're going to click through. They're going to see, oh, this guy posts about business books. I like business books. Follow. And so every day you're collecting your ideal target followers by commenting on their posts. Again, you're not looking to say, follow me, follow me. You're just looking to leave your genuine 2 cents. And then that comment on the trending post is going to get seen by other accounts as well. And they're going to check you out and probably follow you too. Now, while I'm in the comment section, I'll go and like all the other comments as well, because it only takes a few seconds. And those people are going to get a notification and they're going to check out my profile. And if I'm showing up every day and I'm providing value, the likelihood that they follow me goes up the more valuable I am. A few other things happen. You're going to consume 90 trending posts per day in your niche, which means over the course of a few weeks, you're going to see hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands, we could do the math, of content, pieces of content that are trending in your space. You're going to start to understand what works so that you can replicate it and steal like an artist, as Austin Kleon would say. So if you do this every single day, you're going to collect followers that are in your niche, that are real, that are also creating content in your space. And that, I mean, really, they're like almost filtered for commenting and liking your stuff too, because they're already engaging on other people's posts. So they're like more likely than average to engage in stuff than the average person would be, because you're just collecting people that post content in your space and that are already commenting on other trending stuff. So that $80 strategy of going out there and then bringing back by providing value your ideal target followers, that was how I went from 0 to 1,000, 1,000 to 5,000, 5 to 10,000, 10 to 25,000. That's how I did it. And the more followers you collect and the better value you provide, the likelihood that that next person who's checking out your profile presses follow continues to go up, because birds of a feather flock together. If I use my BookThinkers account today and I search hashtag Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I leave a genuine comment on somebody's post that has a few hundred followers, they're going to go, whoa, look at this account that just commented on my stuff. I'm going to press follow. So the likelihood that they follow you goes up over time. So I just wanted to explain that strategy as the best way to grow your social media. before I answer your next question. How do you collaborate with the world's most successful people in your space?
Yes.
Here's the underlying meat of this, that trust is transitive. What that means is that if one is bigger than two and two is bigger than three, there's a law in math that says, three is also going to be bigger than one. So trust is transitive. You can borrow credibility. So this is the case for why we want to work with celebrities. If you trust Grant Cardone and that Grant Cardone trusts me by featuring him on my podcast, collaborating with him, showing pictures together, then you're also far more likely to trust me. And so people like Grant have spent decades building their trust, building their community, showing that they are valuable, providing value. And one of the fastest ways to skip the line is by collaborating with people like that. So a couple of years into my journey, I had a very specific niche. I posted nonfiction books. And so I started to notice that a lot of my favorite authors were following me all of a sudden. They were in my comment section, they were reposting my content. And that happened because I served a very specific need. I can promote and market a book to nonfiction and business followers. And they're all going to write more books in the future. And so they were probably thinking in the back of their head, hey, next time if I show him some love, next time I write a book, he'll show me some love. And that's exactly what happened. Whenever I would position myself for somebody like Grant Cardone, I want to provide value in exchange for his time. I want to have him on my podcast so that I can borrow his credibility and he can borrow my audience. So knowing a little bit about Grant, I'd position it like to his team, hey, Grant has an amazing audience of young, motivated professionals, but so do I. And most of them don't know Grant, playing on the ego a little bit. I know he's releasing another book soon. I would love to help promote and market it to my audience totally for free. All he has to do is give me a half an hour of his time, come on my podcast, we can riff a little bit about the book, and I'll help promote and market it for you. So that borrowing credibility, like I'm borrowing Grant's credibility to grow my own audience. He's borrowing my audience to sell his books, which is a primary motivation of him. I'm playing on the ego a little bit. And so everybody's happy. It's a win-win situation. We exchanged value, but it wasn't time for money, right? It was time for an audience to sell to. Different currency, but equal trade. So I have so many more things to say on this subject, but I'll pause because I know I've been talking a lot.
No, it's cool. I really want people to kind of get the strategy. So like, how do you show up at Grant's door? How do you get past the gatekeeper? How do you go past all of the filters and come out to be the person Grant wants to say yes to when everyone is just knocking on his door like a problem?
There's an amazing book that I recommend called The Third Door by Alex Banayan. And here's the metaphor. Every nightclub has three ways to get in. Door number one is general admission. You got to wait in a long line outside in the cold. You got to pay a cover. Maybe they won't even let you in, right? That's like sending somebody a DM on Instagram who's getting 1,000 DMs and hoping that they're going to respond to you. That's like commenting on one of Grant's posts and saying, hey, come on my podcast. That's general admission. Typically, it's not going to work. Door number two is the VIP door. Now, most of us aren't VIPs when we're first starting out, right? We don't have the money to pay to play the game, right? And we also aren't famous yet. So we're not going to get in VIP. But there's always a third door. And in the case of a literal nightclub, that might mean you crawl in the kitchen window, army crawl through the back, try not to get caught, and pop up in the back of the club. Now, you're still in the club. The lesson here is that there's always a third door. There's always a fun and creative way to get in front of somebody like Grant Cardone. So there were a couple things that transpired that helped me get Grant. Number one, my first interview for my podcast was with Evan Carmichael. Evan is an internet marketer, a YouTuber, an entrepreneur, and Evan was promoting a book. So I had Evan on my podcast. Evan is famous for wanting to be somebody's first podcast guest. He loves being guests on podcast, but he's also really connected. So I had Evan Carmichael on, and towards the end of the show, he said to me, Nick, feel free to use my name. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? He said, use my name. He goes, I have a lot of friends in the industry. You can see the people I've interviewed and collaborated with. If you use my name as a point of reference in your sales pitch to somebody, it might move the needle 1% in the right direction, or it might move the needle 100% in the right direction. You see, if you can demonstrate that you've worked with somebody's friends, they're going to bypass all the due diligence. They're not going to ask you, hey, Prima, how many downloads do you get per episode? What are your demographics of your audience? How many social media followers do you have? They're going to bypass it because you're going to reach out and say, hey, I help people tell their stories, the real honest truth. I just had Nick Hutchison on. I see you guys have collaborated before. You should come on too. Now, for the right person, that means everything. They're not going to say, how many downloads do you get? They're just going to bypass the whole process and goes, oh, I know Nick really values his time. If he said yes, I should say yes too. So Evan said, use my name. Every time you reach out to somebody, let's say on Instagram, you can click on who they follow. If they follow Evan Carmichael, I'm going to say, hey, I just had Evan on. I'd love to have you on too. If you could stack a few names, right, snowball this into a few people, that's the home run point. So when I started my podcast, I had Evan Carmichael, Jim Quick, Russell Brunson. Those were three of my first guests. Those guys are pretty well connected, and a lot of other entrepreneurs follow them. So when I was reaching out to Grant's team, I was looking for a third door. I knew he wasn't going to answer on Instagram DMs. I think I posted like 20 times about his book. He never saw it, any of them. He never commented, liked, shared, nothing. So I was browsing one of his websites one day, and I saw there was a speaking form where you could submit to have Grant speak at your event. And I didn't have any budget to pay him to come on my podcast, but I just wanted to get myself in the door and start the conversation with his team. So I checked whatever the lowest box was. Like I would spend $50,000 or something to have Grant speak at my online event. And so his team reaches out to me and I'm like, hey, spoiler, I don't have any money. And they're like, then go away. And I'm like, no, I have this new podcast where I interview authors. I want to help Grant promote and market his books. I recently interviewed Evan Carmichael, Jim Quick, and Russell Brunson, three people that he follows and that his team should know about. And I'd love to, interview Grant. No. And then I apply a little bit of persistence. Hey, I'll move worlds to make this happen. Grant is one of my favorite authors. I have a huge audience of book readers that know nothing about Grant, and he can sell anything he wants to them. You name the time and date, I'll make it happen, blah, 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 blah. And eventually they said yes. They said, okay, you can do a 30-minute spot with Grant. Here's the time and date, make it work. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make it work. So Grant comes on my podcast because I've demonstrated that I've worked with his friends. I found a third door by applying on his website to have him speak, and I'd pay $50,000, but then I told his team I didn't have any budget. I played to his ego. My audience doesn't know anything about him. I said, hey, he can sell anything he wants, so it's worth his half an hour. And I said, I'll do any time on the planet that works for him. You tell me and I'll make it happen. Right? So I hit it from a lot of different angles. When he said yes, he comes on the podcast, and I printed my very own 10X learner t-shirt or something like that. So I went above and beyond to show like this is meaningful to me. I read his book at the time, the 10X rule, cover to cover, back and forth. I had super intricate questions to show that I am serious and I provide value. And we had a blast. We had a great virtual conversation. He was guest number 9 on my podcast. Towards the end of the conversation, this is another third door lesson. Towards the end of the conversation, I said, okay, boom, wrap it up. Grant's taking his mic off and stuff. His team is helping him disassemble. And I say, hey, Grant, before you go, You have a fun time? He's like, yeah, I had a great time, man. You're awesome. Way to over deliver. I said, I'm going to be in Miami in a few months. Would you like to come on the podcast again? But this time we can do it at your studio in person. I'll help you promote another book. And he said, yeah, man, whatever. Sure, I'd love to. He was half paying attention. But I took that little clip because I was still recording and I sent it to his team. And I said, hey, Grant said he had an amazing time and he wants to do another podcast with me, but this time in the studio in Miami. And so I said, I'm going to be here from this date to this date. Pick any day and time that works. Now, here's the secret. I wasn't going to be in Miami. I had no plans to go to Miami, but if Grant picks a day, I'm going to be there. So his team, they pick a date. Then I book my tickets. And I show up and we record another podcast in person, but we also did one with Elena and we actually got to spend like quite a bit of time with him. He's amazing in person. He's a little crazy on social media, but when you're with him in person, all eyes are on you. You are the only thing that matters. But of course, I took a lot of pictures, took a lot of videos, documented the experience, and I left an amazing impression on him. We gave him a couple of gifts. We asked him questions he's never been asked before. We really tried to stand out. And that's, those photos with Grant Cardone enabled me to grow my business like crazy because back to Evan's lesson of snowballing credibility and familiarity, if Grant Cardone says yes and gives you his time, which is worth a lot of money, then everybody that's below Grant, which is almost everybody on the planet, should also say yes. Because if Grant Cardone said yes, that means it's worth your time. So that Evan Carmichael into Grant Cardone lesson is start with somebody that has a large network that's influential and powerful. When you're prospecting, you go, hey, Prima, congratulations on the upcoming release of your book. I help authors like Evan Carmichael, Russell Brunson, and Grant Cardone promote and market their books. I'd also love to help you at no cost. Here's a link to book. That's it. They bypass any due diligence because you've already interviewed celebrities that they aspire to be like or are friends with them. And you make that next step super simple. Here's the next step. My Calendly link right in the first message. Then they schedule themselves right on the podcast. And that has worked for some huge names. So the final kind of lesson there is when you are prospecting these people, be a surgeon with your words. Surgeons don't perform extra cuts while performing surgery. Like it's not necessary. You do it in the most fast and efficient style possible. When you reach out to these big names, couple of sentences. Hey, congratulations on your upcoming book. I help authors like A, B, and C, all people that they follow, promote, market their books. I'd love to help you as well at no cost. Here's a link to book your interview. That's the formula. So, and then, when you promote and market them on social media, people love to be talked about. And so if you post content that really highlights them and shows them as a superstar, they're going to reshare it. And when they reshare it, you grab a portion of their audience every single time. So it accelerates the growing of yours. Oof, I threw a lot of info at you. Was that helpful?
Very helpful. Like if there is someone that has been sitting there going, oh my God, like these people aren't accessible. They live in another world. I am too small. I'm too this. It's super helpful. You don't know how many people's dreams you just unlocked by saying, Grant can come on your show. I'm also like, oh, what? So yeah, so it's really, really powerful. What's the one question that you wish everyone who interviewed you asked that they never asked?
I would need time to think about that one. Something that comes to mind, which I just want to wrap up that last thought with, and then I'll answer that question, buying myself some time. I've said this metaphor before. Sometimes it resonates well, sometimes it doesn't. But on social media, there's this weird phenomenon where the more followers you have, the less likely people are to reach out to you. So here's the metaphor. The hot girl at the bar. Every guy anticipates rejection, so he doesn't even try. And at the end of the night, nobody talked to the hot girl at the bar because everybody else anticipated rejection. So you would think the more attractive somebody is, the more people want to talk to her. Not so fast. The more attractive somebody is, the more insecure everybody is about talking to her, so nobody talks to her. So she leaves feeling like nobody wanted to talk to me. When I had 20,000 followers on Instagram, I used to get like 50 to 100 DMs, sometimes in a day, because I was looked at as approachable. And as I got more and more followers, and as I started working with people like Grant and all of those names, the number of DMs I would get went down. Now, 5 DMs a day with 170,000 followers on Instagram. It's because people anticipate rejection, so they don't even message me. And I've validated this at conferences and stuff. People will go, "Oh, I've followed you for years. I've always wanted to ask this question." Why didn't you just ask it? Well, I didn't think you'd see it on Instagram. Why? Well, because you have so many followers. You probably get 1,000 DMs a day. No, actually, I get like 5 every day now. We
Wow.
reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of accounts per month, and I get like 5 DMs a day max. So that's the lesson there too, is like, yeah, you might go Grant. Maybe DMing Grant isn't the best, but DMing Evan Carmichael, that's reasonable. All right. So to answer your question, what's a question that I wish I got asked that I don't get to talk about very much?
Yeah.
I mentioned this earlier, like if I didn't run BookThinkers and I didn't work in the book space, I would work in the travel space. Because outside of reading and implementing books, I think that international travel, especially to a country that doesn't speak your primary language, is one of the best forms of personal development. I have done so much learning and growth in countries that don't speak English just by ordering food at restaurants and getting food at the grocery store and trying to ask for directions and all these awkward, uncomfortable moments. They just happen when you're in new spaces. And I love that. I do all of my best growing while I travel. So I think outside of books, travel is the second best form of personal development.
Ooh, I love it. I want to ask you, like, it's probably quick fire, but I also want to talk about like, if you had to give people like 5 books they must read. I know you've gone through a ton of books. So if you were to say, this is the audience of coaches, consultants, course creators, here are my top 5. But then I also want to talk about the rise of the reader and why that book.
Yeah, we can go really fast. So these will be generalized books that could apply to everybody. If somebody gave me a specific situation, like, hey, I'm running a coaching business where I coach internationally and blah, blah, I'd have different recommendations. But here are my top 5 general book recommendations. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy states that small steps in the right direction repeated over a very long period of time will lead to that hockey stick growth that we all look for. It works on social media, it works in your business, it works in your relationships, it works everywhere with your health. There's no area of life where the compound effect can't help you. So that book is foundational. I would recommend The Go-Giver by Bob Burg and John David Mann. It's a wonderful book that teaches 5 lessons, including my favorite, which is the reciprocal relationship between giving and receiving. The more you give, the more space you open to receive. The more you receive, the more you have to give, and that cycle can repeat itself. I recommend The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. It's a wonderful book on delegation, and it also teaches us that reality is negotiable. We can all design lives that are uniquely fulfilling to us, that fill our cups every single day, and that book is the best for it. I recommend The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. That book teaches you about happiness. It's probably the best book that I've read on happiness, and I love that book. And for the 5th recommendation, I will recommend Rise of the Reader, Strategies for Mastering Your Reading Habits and Applying What You Learn, because only if you take action on these books will they change your life. And most people miss that. Like we talked about, the slow, nuanced experience of effectively implementing one book is better than the fast, superficial experience of reading 52 in a year. And that's what I teach you in my book. I teach you how to get the most out of every single book that you read. And that's meaningful to me. And that's why I wrote it. I wrote it because so many people read these books, but they don't do anything with them. There's no difference between playing video games and watching Netflix and reading Think and Grow Rich or Business Made Simple if you don't take action on what you've read. They become forms of entertainment instead of education. And so I try to solve that problem in Rise of the Reader.
I love that book. I must get that book. I looked at it and I'm like, this is a great book. I must get it here. When the bookshop, they didn't have it. Hopefully they bring it and I pick it. And if you haven't yet, you need to pick up the book. Nick, tell us more about BookThinkers. Tell us more about the services you offer. Tell us more about how people can get in your world, because I feel like every author needs to meet you. Every person who is thinking about writing a book needs to meet Nick and his work. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, and I know we have a hard stop here in a couple of minutes, so I'll be quick. I own BookThinkers. I've got 10 people on the team. We help authors promote and market their books, hundreds of authors a year. Like you mentioned, we do short form video, podcast booking, social media book reviews, things like that. I can help authors sell a lot of books and get their books into the right hands. One of the biggest, there are a lot of lessons that I've learned, things that I wish I knew, things that I wish every author knew if they were planning to write a book. One very simple one is this: you need to have something unique to say. If your book is hard to differentiate from other books, if it's the 500th leadership book written on servant leadership, it's never going to go viral. It's going to be really hard to sell. But when somebody goes, hey, how do I get more from the books I'm reading? There's only one book for that. It's Rise of the Reader. It's differentiated. It will come up in conversation when people ask about it. And that's the number one thing that I've learned. If you don't have something unique to say, you can still write a book, but don't expect to sell a lot of copies. um, and what other questions did you have for me? I forget. I told everybody a little bit about the business.
No, that's fine. We just probably want to have like your last words of wisdom. And I know we have a hard stop right now, so we'll end with that.
Here's my very final word. There is a book to solve every single problem that we face as human beings. Like you mentioned in the intro, learning through your own experiences can be valuable, but learning through the experiences of other people is faster and a lot less painful. Books condense decades of somebody else's lived experience into days of reading. It might have taken somebody 20 years to figure something out, and you can figure out that same lesson in a few hours. That's why I love reading books. So instead of complaining about your problems, go out there, find somebody who's already solved that problem, and read their book. For $20 in a few hours of your time, you could be healthy, wealthy, and happy. And I genuinely believe that. So that's my final word for today.
That is it, my friend. To listen to more exclusive interviews like this one, simply go to the World's Best Kept Secret podcast.com and select interviews based on preferred topic. That is it, my friend. To listen to more exclusive interviews like this one, simply go to the World's Best Kept Secret podcast.com and select interviews based on preferred topic.